well, you see the questions online. You can have discussions in the chat, but if you want to ask a specific question to any of our panelists, then pop it in there and we'll try our best to answer it. So why have we chosen this particular topic? Well, we live in an age where AI capabilities, where capabilities once thought to be science fiction are quickly becoming a reality. We've got self-driving cars, robots, 3D printing, virtual reality, and technologies that give us almost instantaneous access to information. However, with the public launch of OpenAI's ChatGPT large language model, 2023 has become defined by much discussion and perhaps hype around AI and our future. Is that going to be a utopian dream or a dystopic nightmare? So it seemed right for SPDM to discuss the rise of AI and how this interacts with data management. Because I think a lot of us know how important data management is and how it can support any uses of data, including AI. And with that, I'd like to introduce our fantastic panelists for the day. I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. So first of all, Pamela Kitchen from Shell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Great, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody, and many thanks for the invitation to be here. My name is Pamela Kitchen. I'm in the upstream development part of Shell. My role is the general manager for technical data management, supporting the upstream business, and I also have a team of workflow consultants that deploy our technology within the Shell organization. I have a second role within Shell where I'm the global lead for a community of practice and technical data management, and that's really focused on emphasizing the significance of the value of data and how everybody who touches subsurface and wells data actually has a responsibility and accountability to do the right thing with that data, whether you're a petroleum engineer, geoscientist, or a technical data manager. So great to be here. Thanks.
Fantastic. Welcome, Pamela. Thanks for your time today. Moving on to Jim Crompton of Colorado School of Mines. Jim, would you like to take the floor?
Well, welcome everybody. I said I very much appreciate being on the panel. I hope I don't, kind of fall asleep here in my chair. It's 4 a.m. in the morning where I am in the United States. So, but I still set my alarm and listen to it so I can get up and participate. As Lewis said, I guess I'm just retired from a teaching faculty position at Colorado School of Mines here in Golden, Colorado, where I've teaching and developing courses in the area of petroleum data analytics. So it's as Pamela is working on the data management background, I'm working with these unruly users called petroleum engineers who are trying to figure out how to use this. Interestingly enough, in my last semester, I gave an assignment to the class to actually go to ChatGPT to have it do their assignment for them, just so they could become more aware and actually find out how good it is. But also, then we could have an opportunity to discuss some of the challenges. But I'm ex-Chevron, where I was involved in the digital oil field automation and digital technologies for a number of years. But that's been a while ago. I mean, I keep following the fast moving trends in the industry. Been involved in the PPDM organization out of Canada on data standards and education around all of this. But where I'm sitting, it's still dark outside. But I hope that we have a lively panel, and thank you again for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much for getting up at goodness knows what time to make it for 4 a.m. Session. It is one of the difficulties we have as an international organization at SPDM. We have membership across the world, so we really do appreciate that. And thank you, Jim, for doing that for us. I know you've got a lot to add to this, so thank you so much. Moving on to Henri Bondel from Agile. Do you want to introduce yourself, Henri?
Yes, no problem. So my name is Henri. I am a geologist by education, but I've been working most of my career with CGG, which is a leader in seismic acquisition. I've been a practitioner of neural networks in the 90s, where at the time we were trying to classify some seismic traces using neural networks. And I've created with two other co-founders AgileDD in 2016. And the purpose here was to see how some new AI algorithm could help data management, because and I'm still thinking that AI can help a lot in subsurface data analysis, but data management is frequently remaining a bottleneck to between the documents and the data to be analyzed. So to solve it, we have created AgileDD, and AgileDD I'm officially the CSO, but in fact I am helping our customer to be successful in deploying AI systems in their data management workflow.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for your session yesterday. If anybody missed that, they can catch up on the recordings. It was an interesting session, so thank you so much. And I'd say last but not least, but not quite last, our last human panelist for the day, Alexander Jewell from Shell. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Alex Jewell. Thanks for having me. I work for Shell in the OSDU program as an Epic owner, kind of project lead, looking at the data management tooling of the future on OSDU, so the tooling and the workflows. I've worked for Shell for 8 years in a variety of roles, from data management to seismic data manager roles across various parts of Europe. And yeah, my background is petroleum geoscience, and I was actually the first intake for the PG cert at Robert Gordon, which I believe you did as well, Lewis. That's where I recognise you from.
Are we in the same course? Yes,
I
think Fanula's on the course as well from as a lecturer there. So thank you to Fanula. So yeah, high five to fellow cohort there, right?
Yeah, but no, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, welcome. It's an interesting course actually, because the development of the Society for Professional Data Managers actually came out of the same professionalization effort that those courses were developed through. So interesting connection there. Now, I said we have another panelist who's perhaps not human. Whether they're conscious or not is another question that we're not going to cover in this panel. But what we decided to do is we thought it would be fun to ask one of the AI large language models to answer the questions that we're posing to our panelists. Now, there's lots of choices of which one to use, because there's lots of different programs. I did choose to use Google Bard, and I will admit it's because I'm developing a relationship with it. I know it's not a real thing or person, but it's it feels that way. And I would feel like I was cheating on it to use ChatGPT. So I'm a Google Bard person at the minute, right? That's just how I feel. So I guess, right, with that said, I think we'll move on to some of the questions. So guys, we're going to pop the questions, the main questions that we're asking, just up on the screen here, just so we can keep a reference of what the question is. I'm a bit scatterbrained, which is why I externalize everything, not a natural data manager, right? But hey, we all cope somehow. So I like to have things on the screen as well to remind myself of what we're actually doing. With that said, question 1, what is the relationship between man and machine in the context of data management? Do they work well together, or is there conflict? Now, should we see what Google Bard has said on this, and then maybe we can talk from there? Okay, so I asked this to Google Bard. It said, the relationship between man and machine in the context of data management is one of collaboration. Humans and machines have different strengths and weaknesses, and when they work together, they can achieve more than either could on its own. Humans are good at understanding the context of data and making decisions based on that understanding. Machines are good at processing large amounts of data and identifying patterns. When humans and machines work together, they can use their respective strengths to create better data-driven decisions. So what do we think about that and the question in general? Does anyone want to start?
Well,
Sure, go ahead.
I think, oh no, I was going to say that of course it would say that, because it's trying to lull us into a false sense of security and then take all our jobs.
But it's my friend, right?
Yeah, but that's yeah. I agree. I think it's definitely will we could work together hand in hand, and for the right tasks, I think it would be better suited than a human. But when looking at some of the complex decision making and integration that has to happen afterwards, I think it's probably not like you said, it's a bit of a collaboration and not just one or the other. I think we'll get a lot of nervous people around sort of job losses and that. So when actually looking at it in an organization, I think we've got to be very careful. Yeah, so I'll leave it to the other panel members.
Excellent. Jim?
Well, I think ideally collaboration is the goal. I introduced a concept in my classes several years ago I called AI as a coworker, rather than seeing it as a tool, because it had so much capability even before the large language models. One of the things I think that changes that relationship is the interface with the ability to put natural language processing on top of the AI. I think you change the way that you interact. It's no longer just kind of restricted to the keyboard anymore, and the ability to ask, I guess, human language questions in context of the technical problem, really changes the way that you can do that. I mean, the concern about automation goes all the way back to what mid 19th century England with the Luddites and the steam engines and things like that, and so there's always been a fear maybe that the machine is going to take over from man. I'm more concerned that right now that it's not going to be the machine taking over from man. It's going to be management taking away some of the legitimate roles that humans have in model building and data quality and data standards, etc., and think that the machine can do it all. And it's not the machine taking our jobs. It'll be management who naively thinks the machine can do it all.
So perhaps the hype, or I mean, there has been hype, right? I think we can all agree, right, on that. Perhaps that's going to do a better job of selling this as a solution to the business than maybe the business case for data management that we all have so strongly advocated for over the years, perhaps. Is that what you're saying?
Traditionally, data management has done a very poor job of selling their value to management in that, and therefore the shiny new toy of the new technology development tends to that's what the consultants bring into the C-suite. But essentially, that's not the whole story.
Interesting. Pamela, how do you feel about this in your context within Shell?
Yeah, I completely agree on the collaboration side and the work well together side. I think fair comment on our experience that also the sort of like, well, we're not going to need these roles anymore because it'll all be automated. But I think when we work with our colleagues or from other companies sort of in Silicon Valley, and I think they've gone through their own journey in this space where AI and machine learning could do everything, where now there's a lot of conversation of, however, you need to have that data of known quality or you're going to get rubbish out, and that needs to have so much emphasis, that I hope that the pendulum is swinging, and that the role of the data management is absolutely fundamental in order to be able to get the real value from the AI. So I believe that they can work well together.
It's an interesting point, and we actually have another panel session tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about some of this in the AI in the context of some of our working environments and what data management means to us. And hopefully we'll also touch on maybe some of the skills that we need. That's a question I posed yesterday. I'm not sure if we got around to it. What do I do? I'm 34. I've got a fair whiles to go in terms of career. I'd quite like to have a job in 5 years, or at the rate that they're saying it's all growing in a year, right? So what do I need to do? I come from a subsurface background too. How do I evolve? Now, Henri, you have an interesting perspective on this. You talked about large language models yesterday. So what's your perspective? Oh, you're on mute, sorry. You can do it through interpretive dance if you want.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So as yesterday, I've tried to give you some insight about how the large language model works, and I point out one of the features, which is that they are very, very good about knowledge. They have, if you want, a very large memory, probably better than any human may have, and you can even fine-tune them to focus on a particular domain. But we have seen also that by construction, they are very poor in reasoning. And as data manager, we know we have all in mind this pyramid where we go from data to knowledge and from knowledge to wisdom. And more you go up in this pyramid, more reasoning is necessary. And it's so yes, AI may destroy some job if the job is just based on an expertise, um, build up just on the memorization of experience. And yes, there in the short or mid-term, the machine can do as well. But if your job is not just about an expertise, but it's about making a decision where a reasoning is necessary, we are far away of a time where the machine can do that.
Very interesting, and feeds very nicely onto our next question, which I'd quite like to ask all in a oneer, okay? Which is, could AI replace DM or data managers? Now, if you think it could, raise your hands after 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It cool for some of the job.
Okay, so it might replace some data managers, but not others. Jim, are you going to come in on that?
Well, I think what Henri was saying is correct. The data managers are workflow. Everybody talked about we now have workflow analysts that are part of our data management kind of efforts, and it really is a process from ingestion to curation to discovery to the data processing, the model building. It's all the way through the whole thing. And clearly you look at the computer, the AI, it is good at many of the problems that we have with big data, that there's very large amounts that the human is we broke Excel. I mean, I apologize to Microsoft, but we now have too much data that we can just handle by Visual Basic Programming and Excel macros. So the AI can play a pretty important role in helping us to ingest very large volumes, very diverse variety of data collections into a coherent model, which is what it's trying to do. It does a good job with lots of data, better than humans. It does a good job with lots of variety of data, as long as you have some sort of way of metadata glossary conversion between the different languages that humans use around our data. And but the reasoning part, do I have the right data to build my model? Do I have accurate data quality with regard to that to filter out the garbage early on in the process? And then the humans can then kind of supervise the model, that it can kind of recognize the outliers, the intervention places with regard to this stuff. But the whole workflow is now turning into modeling, because we want to have predictive analytics, not just what's going on now, but what's going to happen. So everybody becomes a model builder, but data management is an entire flow, and AI can play a role in many places. But replace DM, I don't think so. Not in my world.
So we become augmented in a way. It's interesting because personally, I've been thinking a lot more about data governance, right? And I really do feel that that's a great place for humans to be in, because that's essentially the control center of everything. I mean, I work in compliance, right? So, compliance is part of data governance, and I do see a lack of understanding of strategy and governance across businesses, really, to be honest. And maybe that's unfair, but it's just sort of my perspective. And I feel that if we did a better job of that. And I know DAMA, for example, are strong on this. PPM, I'm sure as well. I mean, PPM modeling is a big part of that too. Interesting discussion. I noticed Alan put what ChatGPT said into the chat. Let's see what Google Bard said, because it's actually quite similar. So Google Bard has said it's unlikely that AI will ever completely replace data managers. So I think we agree on that. However, AI can be used to automate some of the tasks that data managers currently perform. So again, Jim, you just said that. This can free up data managers to focus on more strategic and creative work. For example, AI can be used to clean and prepare the data. So yep, what you said, identify patterns and generate reports. This can help data managers to save time and improve the quality of their work. It's very interesting because that's kind of the automation argument, isn't it? It's, you know, all those boring tasks that, quite frankly, as data managers, we've all sat and done, you know, massive spreadsheets, manually going through them. We've all been there, right? Trying to find some way to do it. You know, to take that workload off us and allow us to focus on other things. I guess there is also that slight concern.
Bard just replaced me.
You what?
Bard just replaced me.
Yeah, it's replacing the job of the panelist.
I guess so, right? But that it's interesting, you know, what it will replace and what it won't, because I mean, you know, in my world, there's a lot of data, right? That's physical. So does Bard become like a sort of middle ground person, and then we work on the physical data, and then we work on the control processes and the fine tuning and all that kind of stuff? I don't know. Alex, do you want to come in here, Alexander?
Yeah, excuse me. I agree with everything that's been said. People seem to think data management's a fixed thing with fixed roles. And if you look all the way, you know, for the last 20, 30 years, the roles changed probably as new applications came along. And so this is just a new application, new bit of technology that we have to be very careful to compare the two. And as you're saying, it opens up the opportunity for other more exciting pieces of work that is also a lot more aligned with a younger generation coming into to the space. So I think I don't really have much more to add on the others. Just I agree with them. I think very long term, it might replace a lot of, probably 90% what we know today as data management, but will be something completely different by then.
Awesome. Now, Pamela, will you be taking on board or hiring Google Bard or ChatGPT within your business?
Yes and no. So just building on what's been discussed already, and again in full agreement. But I think the areas that we've not discussed are indeed automating the mundane or the repetitive tasks. Fantastic. Improving the quality, reducing the elements that's just natural from human error with typing in numbers. Yeah, we're going to get a benefit from there. I think having the AI assistant can also improve the creativity in the role of the data manager. So as Alex says, the role evolves, and it's another piece of tooling in your kit for your delivery. So the reason that I don't think the data managers will be replaced is within the world where I'm specifically working within the complexities of subsurface data, is that we just have too much variety, and yes, of course, we have analogs, we have models, we have trends within geology, but you need that endpoint of that interpretation of that knowledge in order to make that decision at that endpoint. In a previous role in Shell, I actually got to work with some of the big kind of, again, some of the Silicon Valley organizations that were like, we can replace your seismic interpreters and use some of the great AI functionality, and it completely beat them. They were like, I mean, there's just the sheer volumes that we're working with in a seismic sense, and the complexities and the nuances of seismic loops. We, you know, after 6 months, we're like, we have to part ways. This isn't going to work. And yes, yeah, there are again, there are certain elements that can take us a certain way, but the kind of the interpretation, the end game, you have to have that knowledge in order to kind of make the output from a decision. And then a second area on here is within our world is the health and safety potential risk with some of the sort of work that we're doing, where and that's where I think someone's referred to that as well, where you need the experience of the data manager in order to verify what's below, what's the outcome and the quality and the trust of what's gone into your AI or machine learning algorithm.
It's a really interesting point, right? Because the world that we live in, there's almost two, I see almost two forms of data management. I mean, there's many forms of what data management actually is to different people. But as far as I see, the big tech world sees data management very much as digital streaming data management with pipelines and all that kind of stuff, which, I mean, no disrespect, I feel like it's an easier problem because the data is literally machine readable, right? It's natively digital. You can change it a bit easier, I would think. You know, the world that we're in, you're right, they not just oil and gas, but most legacy industries, you know, have this issue. And David Muir actually just popped in the chat that they'd like to see AI help us to manage our legacy well data. And it's true, there's a lot of value in that, but it's such a challenging problem because the data is simply not machine readable. You know, and some of these things are handwritten. I mean, Patty yesterday mentioned that, you know, back in the day, you know, remembers, you know, seismic interpretations on paper sections, and I can guarantee you, you know, I'm currently the information samples coordinator at BP through SWORD Group, and you know, it's like Raiders of the Lost Ark, guys. It's the reality of the data landscape. So there's got to be a balance between the two, because there's the traditional data management, subsurface data management, which I think sort of is kind of where this society was originally birthed from, albeit it's evolving into different areas. And I think where you're talking about coming from as well, Pamela, I came from that world too. And then this new world, and it's where do these two meet, right? And this AI discussion, I think, facilitates that, because it's not, we're not always defining the same things. Does anyone else want to come in on this discussion or this question before we move on to the next one? No? Okay, no worries at all. So thinking about data management and our workflows and everything, and our data management principles, how can AI be used to improve data management? Jim, you were mentioned about how it could be used in our workflows and things like that. Do you have any comments on that at all? Or do you feel you've covered it?
Well, if I can just comment. I must have said something to offend Bard, because he kicked me off for a moment, and then he pulled my internet access. So I apologize. So he let me back in. I want to build on one point that that was kind of brought up and that Pamela mentioned. That I think the problem here is variety, not volume, within the big data problem. The AI is, or even other data processing, simpler data processing things, can help us with volume. There's a brand new set of data architecture tools, the data lakes, the data fabrics, all of these sort of things that can help us manage volumes. So, you know, that's not the part that is challenged. The challenge is the variety of data we now try to ingest to build a more complex model, a more insightful model, that we reach out to different data types, we reach out to different functional data languages, or we have to, AI has to help us improve our connectivity with these tribal data languages. What is a well means different things to a driller than a production. And I think if we can, AI in terms of data volumes, that's a no-brainer, and we're doing that today in most opportunities. But to bridge the variety, to help us build a common language, I referred to earlier the metadata glossary, where we can begin to help us understand each other. That sort of metaphor around all the rest of that. But to do that, we have to train AI to understand us. And that's a role of data management. And that ability to define terms, standardization, that, you know, when I say, well, what does that mean? Again, I think that is a great opportunity, because that is a direction where an awful lot of quote unquote analytics is headed, is to be predictive, but it is also to be predictive in a much broader holistic sense.
So it's very interesting. So would it be right in saying that you're saying a bit like that data managers, obviously you're saying we can use our insight to train and tweak the models or the AI. Do we then, are we then becoming the sort of the owners of the whole workflow? I think Fanula put a comment in about the life cycle. We would own the life cycle, and AI would be used at moments within that life cycle. Would that be correct?
I'd use the word steward rather than owner, but yeah, I support your term. Your kind of an approach. Life cycle, absolutely. There's also these terms of data at rest and data in motion, right? The data at rest would be maybe structured data, maybe SQL, maybe terminologies of the collection of legacy data that we have. That's one challenge and role that we all have. But the data in motion brings us into the reality of operations. So that, the pressure temperature at a certain sensor was, 5.2 yesterday, and it was 5.6 today. So there is this element of the data mathematical, keeping up with the operational reality. And so we have that challenge that data is not static, and much of our data is not static, particularly as we apply it in field automation sort of applications. So again, another area where the V's of big data, the volume, the variety, but there's also a velocity element to it as well.
It's really interesting because I think Pamela also raised the question of, and I think Jez Cosman as well in the chat just mentioned that in highly regulated industries like the energy sector, I think Pamela, you mentioned that there is real issues that can occur from poor data management. I mean, the San Bruno disaster in California was a gas explosion. One of the factors for that was essentially poor data management was one of them. It's one of the biggest lawsuits in American history, and there's many examples of that happening. So I guess Alex or Pamela, I'm quite interested what you guys think, given your experience with Shell, and how do you see AI fitting into that context of data stewardship? Do you see that developing there? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll let Alex go first.
So you're referring to the life cycle comments that were made and being the sort of So I think it's a dangerous place for us to own certain parts of the model or the data, just as it is today. The reason being is that these models are extremely complex, and when you're integrating lots of data together, the decisions made from them at the end you need to really understand before using, especially with the high HSE exposure that our industry faces. So I think with a life cycle and Jim was mentioning, data management is a workflow, is that we need to be able to call on certain aspects within a workflow that they are built and owned by a specialist group. So I think when we can steward the data, but in terms of the logic behind the models, we have to be very careful where we place them. Also legal aspects as well to do with entitlements, obligations. So really understand before doing, but we can play a similar role that we do now.
And by that you mean a bridge between the various parts of the business.
Exactly. The role we play today, data managers really have power in the industry when they're integrating and acting as the bridge between the different disciplines. So I don't see anything different here. It's just that we've now got another stakeholder that is a data scientist or creating these models. But again, to be able to use that at the right time and to use it responsibly still takes a lot of knowledge around it. Which is how I think the data manager's job will start to evolve and how we need to evolve. But I won't spoil the last question.
Mm-hmm.
Over to Pamela.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this probably goes more into kind of future AI create better working interdisciplinary teams, and in the future, I mean, I think I'm kind of excited about how our business models can change, and that we work due to the limitations of silo databases in silos. So the opportunity of having that an OSDU, for example, liberated data with AI machine learning on top of that enables another level of transparency that we've never had before, where you start to get to the opportunity of having data products which are provided towards senior management to make the decisions on, and I think that's what Alex was meaning. You know, those, as a data manager, you can, and I love the word steward, you can steward the AI, the output to the decision makers, and have that transparency, and again making sure that you have some level of data quality or trusted data, and you've got that governance below that. But it's I really sort of see that we're getting within the next few years to this tipping point of kind of like a different way of running in the businesses that we're in, which is getting a bit more like the, I don't know, I mean, maybe price management with airlines, where they're constantly looking at data and they've got the fingertips, where there's like, oh, suddenly we need to increase the price of this flight. Where just the opportunity within our sector of having that transparency, visibility, automation is really exciting.
It's really interesting. In the session yesterday, we actually had a discussion around about around about that. Sorry, I wanted to just make a wee point about some of the answers, rather than going through absolutely every single answer that Google Bard has given us. It can be very generic, and Dawn actually just posted a wee comment in the chat there saying that, you know, these algorithms can be confident and arrogant, and it's true. I don't know if you've experienced using them. Often they'll give you a very confident answer, and if you know what what it's talking about, then you can kind of go, actually that's not quite right, and it goes, oh yeah, you're right, yeah. Don't worry about that, and here's something different. You know, it's almost like it's throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and that is concerning because there's a temptation, I think we mentioned previously, with leaders, for example, or managers, deciding that AI is going to be the thing, that we use rather than people, and there's a concern that that the confidence of it maybe belies its true capability, perhaps. So I guess moving on to kind of these questions about best practices and how can, that kind of thing. Do we need like more industry standardization? I realize OSDU is a huge project. I think it's got over 1,000 people working on it, somebody said recently. Where do we see that going? Do we think that that's even achievable? I mean, given how difficult it can be, I mean, we have some precedent for this, for example, the SegWise standard and the committees that work on that. But I believe it can be quite challenging to collaborate this. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Jim?
Well, I guess I would say we don't need more standards. We need better adoption of the standards we have. We've continuously run ahead, I guess, with some companies. Certainly the Shell Schlumberger collaboration around Ocean and OSDU now and all the rest of that has been a tremendous example of best practices. But on the other hand, you can find another company that's back in the 1960s in terms of how they manage data through their structured data silos, et cetera. So, I think in a sense, it's a problem of both standards and flexibility. The standard for the platform, and OSDU is a platform, many other things are that sort of platform. So we don't have to worry about the complexity and the inefficiency and the part of the problem where we really don't add a lot of value. But then we build on that platform with the flexibility and the ingenuity with the use case, that it allows us to go wherever we need to go with regard to pulling data, building models, doing the analytics, and in that way, I mean, it's sometimes an uneasy collaboration between those two concepts, and that idea of some things needs to be standardized and other things need to be just enabled with regard to that stuff. So I'm not in the camp where everything needs to be standardized, but I am in the camp that standards really matter.
Absolutely. I think we all agree, to me, it's all about having some form of consistency and strategy around your data. And for me, standards is a version of that, right? It's having some, there's no perfect system, there's no perfect solution, but you have to do something. And many companies think, well, I mean, I work for, I won't say who, but I used to work for a company who said we don't do data management, but that was total, it was not correct at all. Everyone does data management. If you think you're not doing it, you're doing it badly. Right. I'd like to bring Jill Lewis in if possible. I mentioned the SEG standards, and Jill, you've got your hand up. Are you able to speak? A guest panelist.
Give me a second and I'll organise that for you.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, so we'll bring Jill in once you're enabled. Just let me know when that's the case. Henri, do you have any thoughts on that just before we bring Jill in?
Yeah. First, I would like to thank Jim, who had just 5 minutes ago said that maybe the role of a data manager is to explain our world or subsurface world to the AI, and that is perfectly true. The role of data manager will be more and more to QC the model, to train the model, to fine tune the model in order they are efficient in our world. And yes, I think the data manager is the best for that. But maybe we can go back to the initial question you asked just here. As I remember, it was how AI can improve data management. I think AI is already improving data management, and that for years. Maybe we don't remember, but AI make possible the OCR of unwritten documents. AI make possible me, for example, to read an assessment report written in Azeri or in Persian, which I cannot do without AI. AI make possible some detection of patterns on a seismic section or on documents, and that is something we do every day for decades, or maybe not a lot of decades, but 1 decade. And we have already forgot about that. Yes, AI is already in our day-to-day life and helping us a lot, and has improved our job as well. So they are part of the job which were very cumbersome and which are now done by AI, like I don't know, detecting a set of well name in a corpus of documents. It's a task which is done every day by AI already.
So it's already here, right? It's what you're saying,
it's already here, it's already deployed, and it's we are considering that it's normal now.
Absolutely.
So and it will continue like that.
I'm going to bring Jill in just a second. I just want to say,
Sure.
yesterday we were talking about this topic, and somebody mentioned, because obviously Jim, you're talking about the data manager, teaching the algorithms and everything to be more effective, and we had this comment yesterday about AI being a potential store of corporate knowledge, and we all know that we're quickly losing people to retirement, we're losing people out of the industry, we're not getting the same replacement rates, and I have this big concern. It's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about societies like SPDM, is that we need to capture this information, this corporate knowledge, because once it's gone, it's gone. So could AI assist us with that? It's an interesting question. Jill, would you like to come in? I realize I mentioned SEG standards and that piqued your interest. So welcome, guest panelist as you are.
Thank you. Yes, no, I just wanted to say, and because I don't know if everyone's aware of it, that a memorandum of understanding has actually been signed between the OSDU and the SEG, so that the SEG standards do remain the exchange standards. And of course, there's massive encouragement at the moment to use SegWi2. But my puzzlement is that we need clean data for AI to work efficiently. If you're going to put data into VDS, then surely you're going to make sure it's clean first. You're going to almost have to as a demand of the system, and to capture certain metadata aspects. And yet we have Schlumberger, Halliburton, CGG, Thales, Geoscope, Ware Oil, you name any of the big data pools and systems. The only ones I know that can handle SegWi2 are ones we're working with. And as for inputting it into the key interpretation systems, such as Petrel and OpenWorks, they don't accept it, that you cannot input the data in the latest SEG format, yet it was ratified 5 years ago. Now, there's a clarification going on at the moment, and also a slight alteration, whereby between the binary header and the trace headers, you will be able to capture the actual trace header layout. So it's a way of capturing the knowledge of the people or the knowledge of the AI system and the assumption that has been made. If we do that, we have an audit trail, and we will actually know what we're doing, and we can always reverse engineer something that's given us an incorrect answer from AI because the data's incorrect. I just feel these loops are all part of a picture where someone needs to build the whole jigsaw and not just parts of it. And because people are only addressing parts of it, we're never going to have the full picture. And that's
So
my
interesting.
concern.
It's interesting, Jill, because is that not kind of the whole problem with data management, even in any setting? That's what I see, is too many people are focused on their narrow scope of things rather than thinking about the actual wider kind of initiative. So it's interesting. Maybe it's like, was it the Fibonacci numbers or something that kind of, you know, keep repeating through nature? Maybe that's happening for us in data management. So there's a couple more questions. Sorry, Jill.
Yeah. Sorry, no, I was just going to say the number of times people readdress the same data set because they haven't updated it or captured the knowledge of the previous person that actually figured out what was going on is just a dreadful waste in our industry, to be honest.
Absolutely, and it's a huge effort actually to try and capture that. I do try and do that myself to greater or lesser success, but it is difficult. And unfortunately, humans, you know, there's a cultural element here, you know, path of least resistance. You know, there's lack of resourcing. Maybe AI can actually help us be better at that. Hence the sort of question about, you know, the corporate knowledge store. I just want to move on because we do have a couple more minutes. We can run over a little bit before the networking session. But, you know, speaking about the sort of cultural elements, we have a question about the sort of interdisciplinary teams and all of that. And we've mentioned how AI may be used, but there is kind of a fear, right, within organizations of being replaced by AI. And, you know, how do we introduce these technologies which do kind of feel different? You know, maybe they're not so different, but they do feel like a big step change. How do we introduce them without people giving up and thinking, no, I'm going to go get a different job, or you know, not feeling too threatened that they simply undermine the project?
I actually think the younger community will not only embrace but enhance what's happening at the moment, and it's really up to those that are of a certain age that they know how to analyze trace headers and they know how to recognize a format of a certain age or an encapsulation to help that younger generation make the best of these opportunities. But there's so much work to do that. I don't think anyone needs to be afraid of their job. It's a massive, massive task. And
yeah,
there are only so many people that know how to do that type of thing.
So Alex, sorry, I don't mean to kind of call you Alex, Alexander.
Yeah, no, Alex.
You mentioned the younger generations. Do you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, so I think AI will, again, it prefers what we spoke about before. It will replace certain tasks, and then what I think we can see is that the newer generation coming in are less wanting to stick in their lane. They're integrators. They've got, you know, information coming to them all the time, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. So they love consuming huge amounts of knowledge, information. So I think what we're going to see is a crossover of all of the disciplines. So you won't, you know, I predict in 10 years time is probably, you know, people say never predict when you get being recorded, but probably in 10 years time, we won't have a geophysicist, a geologist. It will just be a sort of geoscientist, or you know, it will become a much more merged data set, skill set. And so where the roles will start to get replaced are unfortunately people that aren't prepared to invest the time in moving with the times. And that can be extremely scary for somebody that's put in, you know, 20 years investment into how Recall works, the Inside Out or OpenWorks or whatever, and then suddenly they have to reskill, and it's becomes less attractive. I think we can all sympathise, because I've out of university for 8-9 years, and the thought of going back through it is, you know, terrifying for me. But so I understand where the emotion comes from with that. But I think, yeah, the younger generations, as Jill was saying, they're going to love this. They're going to be all over it. They don't like to be constrained and said, okay, you're now sitting in that team and you're not going to move for the next 5 years. I think that's what OSDU will bring, is this sandbox where they will just be able to let themselves go crazy. So.
Thank you so much for the beautiful segue into the last question about the skills that data managers need. It's this is a selfish question as well from my perspective. As I said, I want to have a job in 5 years. What do I need to learn? I have a geology degree, obviously we've done similar courses. Alexander, we as we discussed at the start of this, we were cohorts, and there are skills and courses available for data management, but this does feel different. I've often sat down and thought to myself, do I need to go and do a master's in data science, or do I need to become a software engineer, when quite frankly that is not my skill set. As I said, I'm scatterbrained, not too diligent. So Jim, do you want to come in on that, the question of skills, or any other comments you might have on this?
Well, I guess I'm one of the reasons why Alex is terrified coming back to campus, because he'd have to take classes from wizards with gray hair like me, who's clearly not part of the younger professional generation. But he raises a good point. I think that, and so does Jill, in terms of the affinity for newer technology. The younger generation is well prepared for that. The courses that I teach, and I'm teaching all the way from seniors to graduate students in petroleum engineering, and you go back 20 years, and their technology was, again, the Excel macro, kind of a driven thing. If you couldn't put it in a spreadsheet, it didn't matter. Now, I have homework assignments where they have to use Python and build an artificial neural net in order to solve a problem, not of 100 wells, but 10,000 wells in a basin. And that's a homework assignment for a petroleum engineer. So, and they actually do very well. I mean, they're better, much better programmers than I am, because that wasn't the skill that I picked up. I'm not worried about the generation that's just graduating. I think the challenge to be a lifelong learner is those that, I use the joke in my class. If you've been in the industry for 10 or 15 years, Amazon was a river and R was a letter, and Python was a snake. It wasn't the technology tools that you tried to use. So, but I don't think, it's always back to university courses, although, many universities, Europe as well as North America, offer, kind of online graduate certificate sort of programs. But a lot of this stuff has gone into Coursera and even YouTube and other sorts of ways where you can learn just the bits of knowledge that you want incrementally to add to your CV with regard to those things. So, it isn't go back to school. Well, that is terrifying. But it's also expensive and interruptive of your life. But if you can find a way to use the knowledge that is available, some of it for free, but it does take time. I mean, that's the investment. You have to kind of recognize that if you're not a lifelong learner, you're going to be left behind. And on the last few years, the pace of technology is quickened, so that you're falling further behind, even if you are, trying. I mean, and just taking a few courses and the rest of that. It is more than a degree. It is more than coursework. It is a data literacy capability. Now, that's hard to manage, hard to measure, but that's what we all, as individuals, as companies, as profession, kind of need to focus on.
It's really interesting, Jim, because I'm actually kind of that generation that you're talking about. I've been in the industry sort of 12-ish kind of years, so I had a childhood free of tech, right? I mean, we had and then literally mobile phone at a certain age, like maybe 9. And I'm a millennial, but I'm like, there's a tip over of millennials where some are closer to Gen Z, some are closer to Gen whatever was before us, can't remember. And so we would just be home for dinner at a certain time, right? When I was a kid. By the time I graduated university, we had iPhones. right? So we've ridden this strange wave of technology where I remember VHS tapes, right, and things like that. I mean, I never know what 9-tracks are, but that's a bit before me. So yeah, there you go, right? And so it's really interesting for me. You know, we've had to continually adapt to technology, but there are some problems facing the younger generations. And Fionnuala put a comment about inclusivity, and it's a good point. You know, with remote working, you know, it's much more difficult to train younger people coming in, and there is also like a bias towards thinking that they do have all these skills. Where, you know, people who are older have just had to learn and adapt, and we might actually know a little bit more about how a system really works from our history, right? But we can't just assume that young people automatically have these. Yes, they've natively used technology a bit more, but they might not know how it actually works. And I think we really need to do a better job of bringing the younger generations along and getting that knowledge. I want to plug all you guys in, right, somewhere and download it. Will that be into AI? Who knows? And that's another question more generally. You know, another thing I benefited from was I was part of the CDA council. I graduated with a geology degree, went offshore a couple of years, wanted to come onshore, and fell into data management. As a lot of us fell into it that way. I just found this community of people at CDA, which was kind of the precursor to the UK NDR, if that makes sense. It's a long story. What it actually was, it's a community of data managers that came together essentially to solve a problem. And from that community, I mean, I'm still good friends with a lot of the people who were there, and I learned so much from that. Can societies like SPDM, PPDM, DAMA, can we do a better job of creating that community? I mean, I hear from data managers who really feel alone. They feel out there, like, you know, that they're just sitting. I felt like this, where you're sitting at your desk thinking, nobody else cares about this. Why am I fighting this, right? Could we do a better job, perhaps, of bringing that together? And what would that look like? Do we need a data management think tank or something, you know, where we come together and share our passion? Because, you know, a lot of us are here because we do care for some strange reason that I can't explain, right? Pamela, what do you think about that? Just before we move to our networking.
Yeah, you speak close to my heart. So the drive or the wave that we're really trying to harness within the Shell world is to drive that community and that knowledge. So your observation, and I do get the opportunity to talk to data managers and other companies as well, different sizes, and I think that loneliness and at times we get sort of, and this isn't derogatory to any of my IT colleagues, but it's this thought that AI can take over and it's an IT solution, but it's almost our moment in that the tide is turning, and the benefit of or the absolute prerequisite of having good data knowledge, stewardship, understanding the business processes is fundamental to the efficiency gains and the sort of enabling of automation and AI and machine learning into bringing all these interdisciplinary data types into the complex decisions that our companies have to make. So I'm preaching to the converted under this panel, but I do think it's our moment, and if we can help each other with the messaging, how we're getting people on board, then great. Why shouldn't we do that? And I think there's an element kind of in some of the earlier questions as we're thinking as well, which we haven't necessarily talked about, is and we've touched on it a little bit, is that fear of change and being the catalyst of change and taking people through that path. And I think that's a really important role of us as data managers. So if we think of the skills question, if I can just kind of summarize it to finish off to close out this point, I think there's 3 areas on the skills that we're focusing on. So you need that domain knowledge. So Lewis, you talked about, okay, you know, I came from the geology degree. You probably wouldn't be able to do the job you're doing today without that fundamental knowledge of the type of data processes, geology, geophysics that we're working with. So that's sort of one pillar, and the business processes associated with that. And so a learning element could be, if you've only worked in exploration data, what's that going to mean to production or brownfield or WRFM? And so expanding, because we've talked about the more of the broader life cycle, which becomes more available in this brave new world we're moving into. So one is the domain. Secondly is those digital skills, and I think Jim made a really nice comment. There's so much available online, and I see the people who are going to be successful are the folks who've got that just inherent love of learning and just going out there grabbing information. And then the third area is really the communication skills, the consultant skills. So we talked about sort of the fear of embracing AI machine learning. Some of the earlier algorithms we had with our petrophysicists, they were like, I can't trust this. I can't approve this. I can't assure it. But we had to take them through it, show them the science behind it, and then gradually you're like, okay, yeah, and then they embrace it and then they fly. So it's that consultative communication, influencing skills that we also need to build.
100%. Data management's an art, and I really do feel there's a lot of people skills involved, particularly in the communication elements of it. Absolutely. So it's interesting you mentioned communication skills too, and that was one of Bard's answers. Although it did do earlier, I don't know if it was before we started the bulk of this call, Alan had mentioned that these algorithms do often somewhat miss the point. So some of the skills it also said was data analysis and visualization skills. Now, of course, they are important skills, but are they data management? Jim, we're going to move to networking. Do you want to answer my question there? Is data analysis and data visualization data management, or is that a use of data? Just a quick response if you can.
Well, the whole idea is, as data management is a very broad, complex kind of topic. It isn't just I know SQL and I know the codes for the LIS version of all of the well log files that are stored. I mean, if you define the data management that narrowly, I think that you are missing the broad part of the life cycle. But again, when I say that data management, in my view, is this very broad thing that goes all the way from ingesting the data and knowing what quality you have, all the way to the model building and the display. Then I include data visualization as a really, I mean, that's one of the communication art forms of the data management, is to be able to display complex data, modeling results, et cetera, in a way that is actionable, right? So the storytelling, that part of it, I think in the end, if you can't tell the story about the data, then the data isn't creating the value that it needs to for the company. And that includes workflow, includes modeling, includes analytics. I mean, one of my lectures is how to tell a good story with data, and it's all about data visualization. I then follow that up with a lecture on how to lie with data, which talks about some of the problems with some of the statistical and graphical techniques that you either intentionally or unintentionally manipulate the audience about a false conclusion. And it could be data quality, it could be a lot of different things. It could be just truncating the axis on your chart. But so there's a lot of elements to it. Data management is not a simple tactic, and it's not one that I think you rely on an individual to do the task. It's a team. It's a team. It takes a village to manage data, right? You kind of throw that kind of phrase in there. And where you are within that village community depends on your skills and interests and passions. And not everybody has to be a Python programmer. Not everybody has to be the SQL manager. Not everybody has to be the data governance steward with regard to that. But if you don't have those roles, or if you prematurely automate some of those roles and turn it over to the machine, then we do a poorer job than we should. As I think what Pamela said about it is our time. I think Ellen, in the chat comment said it's been our time for 20 years. Why haven't we done it already? Well, I can remember back, it's been our time for 30 or 40 years, and why haven't we done it? I mean, so a lot of the themes. I mean, the younger generation's affinity for technology, the older generation's experience that has been built up, much of it not digital, all these to come together to help those who are actually at the pointy end of the spear right now. You know, Lewis, like you, with regard to who's actually doing the work. You know, from just my opinion, but the older generation needs to learn to speak in the newer generation's formats, right? So, you know, here I'm trying to learn how to blog. I have maybe for the last 10 years or so. I'm using LinkedIn, which shows I'm still old fashioned, but I wrote a column on why do I care recently. And that was your whole topic about all the frustrations over all of these years. Why am I still trying? And, you know, Ellen is right. I mean, that we have had this opportunity for a long time. It keeps changing a little bit, but, you know, we need to seize it. Several of us in the PPDM, we got together and tried our hand at trying to put a podcast together. We called it the 3 Data Wise Guys plus 1, right? And
I've seen that, yeah.
To try to, in a podcast format, which may or may not be entertaining to others, we tried to share some of that older knowledge, tribal knowledge, with regard to some of these sort of issues. And to get to the issue, I mean, the adoption of technology is a change management challenge in all of those kind of aspects, from training to, you know, results and you know, ways to reward people for taking a risk and moving forward, to communication with regard to all of those things. So, you know, the reason we, I guess, haven't done it over the past 30 years is it's hard. And that just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not important.
That's
And
what
it
makes it
doesn't mean
interesting.
that professional societies have to move forward.
Absolutely. I think it's what makes it interesting. And thank you so much for beautifully summarizing data management. I love your point about data visualization. I've always considered it as a use of data, but framing it in the way of an important communicative tool for data management really speaks to my heart. And I love that. So thank you. You've really changed my mind on that. You mentioned, you know, it's about data from ingestion. I think it's about data before ingestion. I work in compliance. We need to know, you know, every piece of data we hold has a legal basis, what we can do with it, what we can't do with it. And that's a big part of it too, you know. Also, you mentioned the, you know, all the different roles that are needed, and not everyone has to be a programmer. I completely agree with you. There's this push for generalists at the minute, that everyone should be able to do everything. And some of the job descriptions you see are just ridiculous. You know, you need to, but what we do, although we're generalists in the fact we have some domain knowledge and we bring together some other skills, we're not all great at everything. I'd be a rubbish programmer, I think, right? But I'm good at speaking to people, I think, right? So make me speak to people, make somebody else do the programming, you know? You know, if you want, don't make your tightrope walkers in the circus tame the lions. That doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, that's just my 2 pence. Now, we've run a little bit over in terms of the discussion, but I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I think it was important that we spoke to some of those points. So what we're going to do now is move to the networking, and we will conclude after the networking, coming back into the room, but just while there's more people in the call just now, because sometimes people have to go. I just want to say a big thank you to all of you as panelists for joining in, everyone who commented in the chat. Thank you to Jill for your interjection, and of course our sponsors as well, Oasis and Icon Science, and Tracy, Alan, Patty in the background helping us as well. So